So if you're Saudi Arabia or UAE or the Trump administration, we're going to keep highlighting it. We're going to keep exposing your war crimes and the famine that you're causing in Yemen. I do note that, as the witnesses have testified, a new report recently came out with nearly 1,000 people killed by U.S. munitions and over 120 children killed. I do have a question about that report. So, Ms. Elma Tukwakel, was that from airstrikes from the Saudi-led coalition that did not also include airstrikes from, let's say, civilian drones and others with U.S. intel? What was the nature of that casualty count?
No, these ones, we have reports about drones, and there are incidents regarding the drones, and there's civilians who has been killed and injured because of drones in 2017 and 2018.
Is that in your report? It's a separate report?
No, it's separate. This one, in this report, it's only the Saudi and Emirati airstrikes.
Thank you. And are you aware of any Saudi or UAE officials being held accountable for the killing of civilians through these airstrikes?
This is a dream.
Okay, so the answer is no. And as you had testified earlier, and as Congressman Malinowski had noted, it appears that many of these airstrikes are not because they're trying to hit a moving Houthi target and missed. It's that they are deliberately trying to target the actual places to hit that have lots of civilians. Is that correct?
What's really strange about the incidents that killed and injured civilians in Yemen, it's very preventable. Many of the cases what we have documented, there is no even a military target. People themselves were asking why we were targeted. It is even strange. It's not, that's why it's not a matter of training, it's a matter of accountability. They don't care. If they care, they can just make it much better. At least not to embarrass their allies.
Right. Thank you. I actually think it's worse than that they don't care. It does appear to me that they are intentionally hitting civilians. So as you know, during the Obama administration, Saudi jets flew and hit a funeral that had a lot of civilians, injuring, killing hundreds, and then they came back around and struck the very same precise location again. So my view is they're deliberately targeting civilians. I think these are war crimes. And my question to Dr. Rand is, when you have civilians in Yemen watching a U.S.-supported coalition killing a lot of civilians, wouldn't that fuel what terrorists are trying to do in recruiting members and causing more people to hate the United States, as well as the British, who are also providing these munitions?
Will you turn on your microphone, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman. As my colleague has said earlier in the hearing, I think if you're sitting in Yemen, none of the outside powers look appealing at this point, and I think there's a lot of blaming that's going on. But yes, this is so directly and obviously a recruiting vehicle for radicalism, extremism, and the next generation of AQAP in Yemen. And behind every sortie is clearly the image of a U.S.-sold weapon, a U.S.-sold airplane, and the maintenance and the other support services. So there's no doubt there is a real risk here of generating greater terrorist threat in Yemen of the like of AQAP or a future generation of radicalization.
And then this is a question for anyone on the panel. It was reported today that the Trump administration is reversing an executive order that would essentially now hide the number of civilian deaths being caused from drone strikes from our intelligence agencies. How many of you think that's a good idea? Okay, no one does. So what's your view of what the harm would be if we hide that information from Congress and the American people?
I'm sure my colleagues have ideas of responses as well, but just in brief, the idea of the 2016 executive order was in keeping with democratic principles of transparency and clear communication to be open about the civilian casualties in line with current operational procedure at DoD. That was the goal of the 2016 policy, and revoking it sends a signal to the American public and to, more importantly, probably allies, friends, and enemies around the world that the United States will be hiding its civilian casualty. I would also say this is a global executive order. it's not related to Yemen, but it's related to today's hearing because one of the original purposes of the 2016 executive order was to send the signal to U.S. allies of how America handles its own civilian casualties in wartime operation, to send the signal that the U.S. is open, the U.S. is transparent, the U.S. is willing to investigate ourselves, which was what we were urging the coalition to do and continue to urge it. So there was a diplomatic value to this executive order in 2016, and revoking it is stepping back and saying that we are not going to expect allies and partners of the United States to adhere to the same standards of accountability of the U.S. military.
Thank you. I yield back.